Hello and welcome. Well, here we find ourselves at the start of a new year, following possibly the most significantly challenging one in our generation's history. And dare I speak the name of the year that was 2020. Now, following that calamity, we have to ask ourselves, what are the consequences on our children's mental health, both consciously and subconsciously, in the short and the long term? Now, this has not been a topic that has been addressed a great deal, and that's exactly what we're here to do today. So, to help talk to us about this, we welcome our special guest, Carolyn Seri, a general registered psychologist. Now, Carolyn has an electric framework and is trained in a number of a whole heap of different evidence-based training, evidence-based therapies. Sorry if I can get my words out, including cognitive behavior therapy, acceptance commitment therapy, children's yoga and mindfulness, play therapy, art therapy, neurofeedback therapy, a whole heap of others. Now, thank you so much for joining us today, Carolyn. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Rachel. Thanks for having me. Yes, I'm very excited to join you and talk about this topic.
Yeah, and as I just mentioned, I just don't know if it's been spoken about enough. I just don't know if people are just avoiding it. I guess a lot of us don't know what I guess the side effects are going to be of what 2020 delivered to our lives. So I'm really interested just to speak to you today, just to hear your thoughts on this. And I know that your experience in working with a whole array of like complex mental health disorders and issues, including
Yeah.
depression, anxiety, um, a whole heap of post-traumatic stress disorders, of course, dealing with children on the spectrum, obsessive compulsive disorders, and a whole heap of other stuff. So you're absolutely the right person to be able to pick your brain
Oh,
today. So no pressure, no
absolutely.
pressure. Now, just initially, I'd love to know what are your thoughts on the long term effects of lockdown and COVID in general, just on children's mental health. What are your thoughts?
I think in Australia, or if you look globally, it's going to vary because I mean you're in Melbourne and I'm all the way up here in sunny Queensland in a small town. Um, the effects and impacts here are a lot less than what they were in Melbourne. But I think they're for even here, there's a lot of apprehension about the what ifs. What if it happens again? Um, Lots of, I guess, missed. Well, if we're looking long term, kids looking back at these special years like last year that they missed out on, and feeling, I guess, sad about that. And I guess that there's something that could be so big that could shut the world down. And a lot of kids that I see looking at, well, what's the next big thing that could happen if that can happen? It's out of a movie. I don't know. I've never really noticed the word pandemic or those sorts of things. And I've watched some movies since. I'm like, that it's out of Hollywood what's happened.
Oh, I don't even
Um,
think a Hollywood sort of scriptwriter could even put together what we've just lived through over the last 12
oh, absolutely.
It'd be one of those movies that
Look,
you
I
just go,
think
that was just the worst movie ever, like
I think
seriously.
oh, absolutely, and I think what I guess the financial impacts of this, and then of course the impacts of parenting. Parents are more stressed. We're about to lose. Our economy has been given this sort of sense of security. It will be incredibly interesting what happens next month when families are already stressed. Businesses are closing down everywhere. Like I guess that's something that is in common all over the country. That there is this other underlying crisis on top of kids worrying about this sickness that can be fatal. So the long term effects, I think we're just yet to see, and it's us paving the way and um, you know looking at how to parent in these times and how to create safe bases for our children to be able to navigate their way and develop, have good mental health uh, going on into the future. Because this is it just the start of these sorts of issues with the world? Are we going to see more and more of this? And we're going to have to. The key is to be building resilience.
Yes, absolutely. Like parenting's not hard enough, having all of this
I
overlaid
know.
on over
We'll just add
top.
something else in.
But like they always say, in every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. We've all heard that sort of saying before as well. And of course,
Yeah,
as you just,
absolutely.
highlighted before, which we all know, every state and territory has been affected differently. So this is just a blanket conversation, just generally, um,
Absolutely.
you know, but I guess looking at the calendar year, here we are. Of course, the kids have just started their new school year this year with 2021, and things are relatively back to normal in most states and territories here, opposed to many other overseas countries, which we, of course,
Yeah,
know are
yeah,
still feeling. And we've all got friends and family overseas, and our hearts go out to all of them, having, especially for us here in Melbourne, knowing what it's like to be in lockdown as well.
yeah,
But
yeah.
in your experience, have you noticed an increase of mental health presentations in your private practice with children since, I guess, the start of COVID, which is almost sort of 12 months ago?
Um, Look, I throughout COVID, I was really lucky I didn't have to shut down my practice. And I noticed I don't think I had one cancellation because everybody came, and it was this um, high level of support that families needed during that time, which was really concerning. And I guess looking at Melbourne and keeping an eye on that, um, and the mental health crisis, and it worries me about the amount of families that do need to come and get support that wouldn't have that ability, during those big lockdowns. But absolutely, and I'm not sure whether it's because of COVID, but in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of funding in the government put into mental health, and people can, I think, they can afford care, and the stigma of mental health, from that is getting less and less. So, and I think COVID's just kind of thrown on top of that in this time where mental health has been put on the top of the agenda. And now we've got this crisis of how are we going to provide care to everybody? So absolutely. But I think it's not just COVID that's doing that. There's many layers to that, but it is a bit of a crisis. Like in my town, there most people in private practice will have wait lists of 3 to 4 months. And when you've got, this is people who see kids and families, and when you've got, family in crisis, it's really scary what to do with them. And I think writing articles and putting things out there and having wonderful podcasts like this gives families something to tap into and just have some little takeaway things that they can do um, to help bridge that gap until they can get the care that they need.
Yeah. And of course, there's all of those telehealth services as well, which are available 24/7, which can help families.
Absolutely,
Which,
absolutely.
yeah, have been just godsend throughout the last 12 months in particular. Um, now
Oh,
we published,
absolutely.
yeah. Now we published your article titled "Psychologists Working with Children and Families." Now, for someone who hasn't read the article yet, can you please tell us what it's about, and of course, just what inspired you to write it?
Um, well, probably just what I was saying just before around giving families something to read. I read a lot of articles, and it always sort of says if you're worried, consult a health professional, which is often always if you're worried, do that. But I think there's a lot that parents can be engaging in with themselves, and caregivers, to provide some sort of first aid stuff in the first instance. So the article looks at a model from a guy in the States, Dan Hughes, and it's the PACE model, and it's based on playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy, and
Hmm.
using that in your parenting, instead of, I think a lot of us have been raised with very behavior management and good consequences, bad consequences, and parenting in this time is quite, there's so much more research and literature and so many more things that we can be doing to create resilience in kids. So by being the article really talks through ways to be playful, ways to accept emotions and be with a child and sit with them through an emotion, um, how to be curious about what's going on inside a child's world rather than telling them, no, you're not sad about that, or no, this isn't happening, but saying, oh, what's the saddest thing about that? Is there a happy thing about that? And then empathy. And I think as being an empathetic parent just gives you such an edge. I have a 10-year-old, and I probably was in the, looking at back though, then those times, I think Super Nanny was pretty big, and it was kind of like, all that time out stuff. So that was a framework I had for a long time, back in 2010. And I have a 4-year-old, nearly 4-year-old, and I use a lot of, I don't know if you know, circle of security and pace-based stuff, and it is a beautiful way of parenting. And by using empathy, just getting the best out of kids, and not needing a lot of punishment. But it's like you're saying before about long term, and this is, I think, the long term, being proactive for the long term is creating those attachments and parenting differently, rather than that real consequential, I'm the boss, you, yeah. So
Yes.
giving, yeah, and moving into the school year, I think just giving a little bit of a framework for, educators, parents, caregivers, to support and hold their kids' hands moving through this.
Yeah. And in your article, you list helpful guidance and support for common and normal responses to stress that I guess many families and children may still be experiencing right now, as we're just mentioning, as a sort of on the back of sort of 2020. And I'd love to talk through a few of them now as an opportunity to provide parents, caregivers, and on top of that, also educators and teachers inspiration to help create feelings of security and safety with children on that model that you were just talking about, starting with providing a secure base for your children. Now, you mentioned that we often see acting out and oppositional behaviour as unhelpful or naughty. And in actual fact, that when
Yeah.
children display these behaviours, it's often not to get negative attention, that they're actually looking to an adult to help them understand what they need and are asking, I guess, for help or something for a need to be met. Could you please expand on this just a little bit more?
Yeah, I think, when a child's being naughty, so to speak, um, we internalize that and we kind of make it about us, and they're kind of attacking us, and they're doing that to, make their life difficult, make our life difficult. And we react to that accordingly with our own emotion that we, oh, hang on 2 seconds, sorry. Just shut the door. At the back. Sorry, another
these
child.
these things happen. It's all good.
um, so creating a safe. I've got to get my thoughts back now. Yeah, so when kids are presenting in this light with these behaviors, and we feel that they're being naughty, we internalize it, and then we react with our fight or flight brain. We're angry and reactive. We're using these, playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, empathy, secure base, and following. Like, first of all, we got to identify what is the need here. Sometimes I
Yes.
say to my 4-year-old, who is a very emotional little girl, she's sweet, but gee, she's hard work. And I've started to say to her, I crouch down and I just say, "What do you need?" And she kind of steps back from whatever she's doing, and she'll tell me what she needs. And she's calm, I'm calm, and we go and do what she needs. Sometimes, you need to take charge and, you
Hmm.
know be have that, authority in the relationship. But often with something as simple as, what do you need right now, and a child can then verbalize that, then you can work on that together, using a number of different ways. You might not always, I mean, we're not going to throw everything at children and give them everything that they want, but
Mm.
following, understanding their need in that moment and helping them to achieve calmness around that need is a great way to be responding to acting out and oppositional behavior. And just remembering that animals are oppositional when they feel unsure and scared. And I think, looking at when you're seeing that naughty behavior, look at it as a big clue to what's going on.
Yeah.
It's big volumes of, oh, hang on, there's a problem here. And if we do something with that, we're better equipped to sort it out rather than putting a lid on it and then it exploding everywhere.
So, providing a secure base is underlying saying to your child, I hear you, I see you, and you matter. And at the same time, I'm still in charge, but I'm kind and firm all at the same time. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Using that, I have a beautiful mentor here in Townsville. I think does some work with some different people in Melbourne. Must be the place to be. Her name's Kerry Spina, and I think she's played a big role in helping me see what using values based mindful parenting and connection based parenting, and it's really powerful whether you're saying it to a child or a colleague or whoever. And if you just say, I see that you're tired, or I see that you're sad, or I hear that that was important to you. And it just disarms the bomb. And they're beautiful connecting language. And so from my good friend Kerry Spina gave me this beautiful handout. And I give it to families all the time, and they come back to me and they say, it's life changing, and they pick a little sentence a week, and they try to find ways to connect with their child using this beautiful language. I have
Mm.
schools that use it, that go teachers that go, oh my gosh, I've never felt so close with my kids, and in their classes. So um it's just that we're just not, I mean, it's starting to be part of frameworks, but many schools just you know gravitate back to that behavior management. And you get a happy face if you're good and a sad face if you're bad. And there's
So,
so much more.
would you say the situation really is an opportunity for parents and educators to reflect on just how we can do things differently, just by understanding that behind every tantrum or every sort of negative situation with children, there's just a very simple need, just wanting to be met, would you say?
Absolutely, and I think with with COVID, it'll be interesting to see how kids are in Melbourne are coping with being back at school and being away from, if they've been at home for such a long time, um, and now having to separate from their parents and then acting out at school. And it could be that the need is that I miss my mum, and I'm just not ready to separate from her. We work on that, and from an empathetic framework, then we can put all the things in place to support that anxiety and that yucky feeling, rather than it being turning into this secondary anger, and
Mm.
um, throwing desks and whatever kids are doing when they're feeling really fighty and flighty. There's just so much that can be done. I think absolutely taking taking this opportunity to go, we just didn't have it right in the past, and it's time to get it right, because we've got, mental health is at the top of the agenda. And there's beautiful programs like the Circle of Security program, um, you know, and for parents to engage in this and learn how to do some really simple things,
Mm.
is, yeah.
And sort of just touching on what you were just saying about looking back, the next point in your article is a time for reflection. So I'd love to know, I mean, how can parents best reflect with children on the year that was
Yeah.
last year and the unknowns of this year and the year ahead? I mean, do you have any tips at all?
I really love Dan Siegel's work. He wrote The Whole Brain Child, and he's got a number of principles throughout that. And one of them, he talks about storytelling, and I use that a lot with kids, and they just love it. Getting them to write their own personal family story and book about what happened, and they,
Mm.
parents then read that at nighttime, and it's so it's very easy to actually get your child's drawings and some text and send it away and get a proper book printed that comes
Yes,
back and looks like just a normal storybook that sits on your shelf.
but they wrote it.
And they wrote it, absolutely, and they can relive the experience, the things that they're worried about, but they can do it in a safe way and in a supported way. And we can add things into the story about how they're okay now. And so storytelling and reflection is an incredibly powerful way that the human brain can process information. We pretty much can't do it without, I mean, language is one of our key things that makes us, you know, human and intelligent, and using our language to help us heal and storytell is a very powerful tool. So maybe educators might even want to at the start of the year do individual stories with kids and then put that together, and then reflecting back for kids who aren't coping, and but storytelling it's
yeah, I was just going to say it's a great time capsule thing as well, to be able to look back at this point in our lives in another sort of 5 to 10 years, when hopefully this will all just be a story. I love that saying that this too shall pass, which is the saying that we usually say when we're sort of going through some
it's a nice resilience phrase.
Yeah, it is definitely. But there are a number of great books to help children understand and digest information about COVID as well. But I do love the idea of actually putting it into their own book. I think that's a great idea and a wonderful time capsule opportunity. And in your opinion, I mean, what do you foresee the pros and cons, I guess, of the big life experiences of COVID bringing our children, and just, I guess, their overall interpretation of the pandemic on this topic then?
Yeah. Look, I think I think the world's different. It's a different place, and we are just paving the way to see what the actual impacts are. But it's not all bad. I was sitting in my oldest daughter is in grade 6 this year, and she had her leadership. They get their badges, and she goes to a Catholic school, and it was an hour mass, and I just was thinking, this is the most boring day of my life. And then it come to the part where we got to go up and pin the badge on our children. And I tell you what, that was the most magical moment that I just want to put in a bottle and keep that there. And I really valued it so much more than I would have, because if there was still social distancing, we wouldn't have even been able to. I wouldn't have been able to have that experience.
Yes.
And for a parent, and in my parenting, seeing the beauty in those moments that just shine, and marveling in them, and going, I'm not going to sit now today and remember all the boring thing I had to do. I'm going to remember that moment of just, that's what it's all about. That's why you have your kids, isn't it? To you go through the good and the bad, but those little milestones. And so I think as parents, it can make us much better parents. But I think we need to shift our mindsets as parents, and make time for absolutely, make time for the boring little stuff, and refocus what we're doing. We're too busy working. And
it's a little bit like, I guess, when someone unfortunately passes away, and you're at their wake, you will always speak about the happy memories and all of the
absolutely
wonderful things that you experienced with.
And they probably would have liked to have heard all that when they were alive.
Absolutely. So it's exactly that sort of point. And the next thing you've got in the article is to be more playful. Now, you mentioned that the chemicals that the brain releases when a child and a parent play sets them up to succeed. Can you tell us a little more about this?
So with it comes into a little bit more of that storytelling again. So giving children the opportunity to play out what has happened. Setting up, I guess, for a child who might be anxious about germs or the pandemic, setting up fun way like slime and sliming the city. And but when we can experience something, and this is a lot of children's play, if you notice, they will play things over and over to go through each part of that experience, and they're doing it. Play is safe, and kids that play can work through any worries, and it helps them to settle. But it also releases all those nice, when a parent's playing with a child, all those beautiful connecting bonding chemicals like oxytocin, and it creates a strength in their relationship. And then kids grow up wanting to go to their parents and wanting to talk things through with them. And
so important.
If you go and fight every day and have a lot of stress, then that's the way your brain will wire. If you are calm and peaceful and play and work through things and communicate, then that's your default way of doing things. So it's your whole brain structure.
Oh my God, that is just so important.
When there's lots of play and parents.
So it's not about,
absolutely. So
and it's not about the here and now.
If there's anything, is play more.
And it's not about the here and now. This is about setting sort of that relationship up for life, as you just said. So it's not just about, okay, they're coming home from school at the moment and reconnecting in the here and now, which is so critically important. It's about, as you said, setting up those neural pathways and the wiring in the brain.
Absolutely.
So that, in another 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 30, 40 years time into the future, that is the I guess the foundation.
And that's just how they do life. My big girl, she's just the most, I don't know, it took highly of your own kids, but she is just such a beautiful human. And adults always say how how she connects and engages, and that makes me really proud, because I think I've done my job well. And I think she's only 11, but she's set up to have positive, helpful, happy relationships in her life. And to address, like, if there's ever drama, she's straight up will call it. And it is beautiful, but it's practice and practice and practice. And this is the way that her brain is now. And then I see that with many kids that I work with in my private practice. We work for a short amount of time, and they come back and they just tell me the most amazing stories. I had a young person who's studying at the moment, and she was going to I guess she was going to address somebody's bullying by letting them continue to bully her. And I sort of stood back and said, what are you getting out of this? And it was just, this person had pressured her into meeting up so they could just get mad at her some more. And sort of with a little tiny bit of language, I get this message saying, thank you so much for the different, the language and the for me to realize that I can be assertive and say no. It's just, and now that you get one or two experiences where you put these things into play, and it just sets you up for life. And it doesn't matter if you're a child, an educator, a student, whatever you are, that there's always room to change. We can teach the old dog new tricks.
Yes. The next thing that you list is to be accepting. Now, I'd love to know from your perspective, what are the consequences if we dismiss children's feelings?
Most people can relate to accidentally walking past the toy aisle, in Big W or Target, and often we'll be like, oh, sure, yes, we'll go down the toy aisle. But then they see their favorite toy and they pick it up so happy and think it's coming home. And somewhere I can see that acceptance. I mean, accepting, often a parent would just say, put it down, we've got to go. And it results in tantrums. And that's life, isn't it? If we snatch something off somebody and say, no, we're going to, whether you're, 2 or 20 or 40. But something that's just really beautiful is saying, I know that, you take the toy, so putting that back, and child gets sad and saying, I know that you really want that toy. And it would be so special to take that toy home right now, wouldn't it? I wish that you could have that toy. I really wish that. Do what if we put it on the Santa list, or, whatever. But that is accepting you feel sad. Or just saying, like, if your child's had a bad day at school, or they're sad about the pandemic or scared about it, is we can just say, I know you're feeling really scared right now, and that's okay. You're allowed to feel scared, and I accept that. And that's probably a really good one for older kids too, with your your preteens, your tweens, and teenagers with a lot of their emotions. As parents, we want to problem solve because we don't want our kids to be hurting. But to just sit beside them and just say, that's cool, I accept that. Acceptance is huge. There's so many different things that we can use that with, but they're just some examples of how we can use that in our framework of parenting
as well. So the next thing you listed, to be curious. Now, you mentioned in the article, and I quote you here, so I'm quoting you, so I'm reading out from the article. When a child is scared or not coping, the thinking and problem solving parts of their brain are on snooze mode. The limbic, is it limbic system? Is that how you pronounce it? Or survival brain is
limbic system, that's right.
Yeah, is in full swing. So by being a curious parent, you can disarm the unhelpful thinking and behavior with some simple actions just by being curious. So
Yeah,
could you expand on this a little bit and also provide us with some examples parents might use
yeah,
if their children are still
absolutely.
being impacted by COVID and or any negative experiences in their life in
Yep.
general?
So I mentioned Dan Siegel before,
Yep.
and I don't know if it's his model, but he uses the idea of this is the brain, and when the brain's functioning nicely, it's all connected up, it's all communicating well, a bit like a conductor
Hmm.
of an orchestra. Conductor comes out, and everybody's playing along, and you can imagine the trumpet player up the back who's off on his own, like doing his own thing or whatever, and we literally flip our lids uh, when we're not coping. So the connection between the top part of your brain, which is where we do all our thinking and planning and rationalizing, and it just goes to sleep. So when that happens, when our brain flips its lid, where something is saying, okay, there's a big brown bear and we need to just go into survival mode. There might not be a brown bear, often there's not. So essentially, just to answer that specific question, if you can engage this, and it can be something as simple as saying the alphabet or counting in twos, and it literally, the brain just starts to re-engage and connect. Now, that's very simplistic, and if you've got a child who has flipped their lid, that may take a lot of setting up. But as adults, that's why we say count to 10, but it's probably too easy, which is why maybe it doesn't work. We've got to find something that's a little bit challenging when our lids are flipped, because it puts us back together again. And then the limbic system sends all those hormones that make our tummies yuck and our bodies feel yuck and our heart beat fast. So if we can put that lid, the top of the brain back, get the connection working again, it pretty much just calms the savage beast, and we can get back to our nice normal functioning. So yeah, by using our frontal lobe, our thinking brain, um, is to turn off that limbic system and to turn off those chemicals being sent out into the body. Um, so ways often, and I see, and I do it sometimes, we overtalk things and we tell kids, we lecture them. So much of what we lecture kids about, if we just asked them a question and waited for them to respond, they would be able to engage their frontal brain up here and find the answer themselves and then calm themselves down. Do you notice sometimes, like if you maybe ask somebody a question and then you kind of answer it yourself,
Yes.
and
Yep.
then you're like, oh yeah, you could sit there and have a whole conversation with somebody and do all the talking and then walk away feeling great because you actually engaged your thinking brain and you turned off the anxiety part.
Yes.
So such a powerful tool to learn how to have open questions, not closed questions with your kids. So asking a question that requires them to engage their brain, and it can be about what's happened. It could be, oh, I can see that you're not coping so well right now and you're really sad. What do you think that would make you feel better? What do you
Yes.
think we could do? And giving space, again, as problem solving parents, we kind of jump in and tell them, and they don't take that on board because they this part's shut down. Learning doesn't happen if this part's asleep.
Yes. Now, the last one that we have in this PACE model, which I absolutely love, is to be empathetic. Now, this for some parents
Yeah.
may be a lot easier and said than done, because in the first instance, the parents themselves need to understand and know how to be empathetic. Now, not every parent was necessarily taught how
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
empathetic and or has
Absolutely.
actually
Absolutely.
exercised it in their lives. Now, in this situation, where a parent was never taught themselves what empathy is, how can they best be empathetic to their own children, and where should they start in just trying to help their children feel supported and loved?
I think I think it's pronounced Brené Brown, and she
Yes.
has this beautiful video on YouTube, and it's about empathy. And she opens it by saying, "Sympathy drives disconnection, and empathy drives connection." I would say to anybody that is anybody, a human that wants to connect with people, to watch, it's like 3 minutes, and seeing that in play. And a lot of it is, it kind of just brings everything that I've been saying together, and it's about being with people when they're not okay, and it's okay to not be okay, but being with somebody, and with our kids, just sitting beside them. So I say to she's 4 now, but when she was 3, and they go through that real tantrumy stage, and they like, I don't want this, I don't want this. And I would say to her, through lots of practice, we're getting there. But I would say, do you want a cuddle? Nope. Okay. Do you want me to sit down here beside you? Nope. Do you want me to go away? No, I don't want you to go away. Okay. I'm just going to sit here right beside you,
Just be there.
and I'm just going to wait. And you sit there, and they come over to you, and then you cuddle and connect. And I mean, again, that's in a sometimes it needs some setting up. I would recommend, if there's parents who are really struggling to identify when they need to be empathetic, finding somewhere in their community to do the Circle of Security program. It is the most beautiful way of viewing parenting, and it looks at you as a parent who's bigger, stronger, wiser, but kind as well, and helps parents to know, to identify needs, and it's very reflective, and it's non-judgmental. So I would say, anybody from this who is struggling to, there's just way more than what I can write in an article, and there's lots of support out there. And attachment-based parenting is, I think, I'm hoping it is just the next 10 years, it just completely takes over, and we get rid of that behavior management stuff, because we're using it with kids who are disconnected and are disorganized in their emotions, which just makes them even worse. But if we can provide connection, safety, stability, and the Circle of Security uses hands as part of their model. If we can be the hands and the holding, supporting kids, then we're just going to get so much further, long term. Yeah. And then, if there's more pandemics, we'll be resilient, and we'll be like, that's cool, this too shall pass.
Yes. And I guess on the flip side of this, for a parent who was taught empathy as a child and has exercised it right throughout their life, is there any additional advice that you could maybe sort of share with us at all?
Is to, again, I'm stealing quotes here, but the Circle of Security, they say, you just need to be a good enough parent. You don't need to be perfect. We don't want, to be abusive. You just need to be good enough. And that, for me, really resonates, because some days, you just want to get those kids' shoes on and get out of the house, and you want things to happen quickly, and you can't be implementing everything all day every day, but finding ways to be good enough most of the time. And the other thing, which I'll steal from that as well, is the rupture and repair. If you rupture the relationship with your child, you make sure you go and repair it, and you work through anything. If you yelled this morning, then tonight you say, hey, I yelled this morning, and that wasn't cool. It would be really great if you could put your shoes on quicker next time, but I shouldn't have yelled. That does so much for repair. And there's lots of different ways we can do empathy in our parenting. If parents feel uncomfortable with touch and cuddles and those sorts of things, and caregivers, there's many ways to be an empathetic parent, caregiver, without doing the Hollywood sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for going through that PACE model. If parents, caregivers, educators want to find out more about that model, where should they go then, in general?
About the PACE model, I guess if you Google Dan Hughes PACE model, that he's got a pretty good description on there. I don't know, it's really been turned into a program. I think for educators and allied health professionals, you can order his DVDs, which show him doing these things. He may have a few things on YouTube as well. I seen him he come to Townsville uh, 10, 11 years ago, and I just went along for a professional development, and I have just clung on to that because it is just a beautiful framework to
It
parent
is.
in. But the circle of security uses a lot of that stuff as well.
And outside of all of this, what kind of issues would warrant a visit to a psychologist who specialises and works with children in light of COVID-19 and its impacts and or anything negative that is affecting to the children in
Yeah.
general?
Look, I think GPs, the GP model is fantastic, and in my experience, they're excellent at seeing a family, helping them to identify if there is an issue that's causing dysfunction, and whether this is going to be a long-term thing, and whether there needs to be more resources outside of the family unit, and the school environment. Um, and I think really in summing that all up is, if you're worried, if things aren't resolving, you've gone 3 or 4 weeks and there's still a lot of anxiety, and this is a new presentation,
Mm,
definitely get off to a GP to look at what the next steps are.
yes,
There's no shame in reaching out.
100%. And we've covered a lot today. If you were to summarize your key messages for anyone watching and listening, how would you summarize what they are?
um, I think that the world is a tough place, and it's
Mm,
getting trickier and trickier to just cope ourselves, and as parents, as caregivers, educators, whoever we are working with kids, being with kids, it is a tricky job. Don't be hard on yourself, and learn about attachment based care and parenting. um, and I think it changes lives. It certainly changed mine. I
yeah.
enjoy parenting so much, even the boring big long mass that goes with the moment of
Did you
pinning a badge
find that
on.
moment at the end of it? So
Absolutely, and you marvel in it, and then you take that with you, and you know that you got through another mass.
now, if parents, caregivers, educators have got any questions and they want to reach out to you, whereabouts can they find you then?
Probably the easiest place. I'm sort of in a transition phase at the moment, but probably just my Facebook page, which I think I've sent you to,
Mhm.
and you can message that there, and I'll try my best to send any links or anything out to anybody who wants any further information on any of that.
And we'll definitely have all of those handles and those links in the show notes, along with a link to the article. Carolyn, I've absolutely loved our chat today and really hope for the
Thank
opportunity
you.
to chat with you again in the not too distant
Oh, I
future.
would love that.
Thank you so much. You take care and we'll speak again soon for
You
sure.
too. See
Right.
you, Rachel.
Take care.
Bye.
Right, bye.